Okay, and now I'll turn it over to Dean, who will introduce our two speakers for today.
Good afternoon. Add my welcome to everyone, and I hope you don't mind, but my sidekick Clem is with me today. He's going to observe. He doesn't say much, but he just sort of sits there and looks pretty. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Paul Grondahl is the director of the New York State Writers Institute at the University of Albany. He's an award-winning journalist and author, and he's been a staff writer at the Times-Union since 1984. His assignments have taken him from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from Northern Ireland to Africa, from New Orleans immediately after Hurricane Katrina in Haiti after its catastrophic earthquake in 2010, and across New York State from Ground Zero on 9/11 to the Adirondack Wilderness. He received his bachelor's degree in English literature from the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and a master's degree in English literature from the University of Albany. Len Tantillo is a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design. He's a licensed architect who left the field of architecture in 1986 to pursue a career in the fine art of historical and marine painting. Since that time, his work has appeared internationally in exhibitions, publications, and film documentaries. He is the author of 4 books and the recipient of 2 honorary degrees. He's a fellow of the American Society of Marine Artists. Paul, I think you're first up.
Thank you so much, Dean and Ed. It's nice to be here with the Emeritus Center again. A lot of my former professors are still friends and colleagues, and I'm really honored to be here today. I'm really just the opening act for the great artist Len Tantillo, who has been a friend and somebody I've deeply admired for 40 years that I've been associated with the Times-Union. As Dean mentioned, I've written thousands of stories on all kinds of topics, but I especially like writing about the history of New York State and the Hudson River Valley. And in the 400 years or so of history, at least after European contact history in Albany, one of the greatest painters and interpreters of that visual history is Len Tantillo. I don't know if any of you saw the incredible retrospective he had that was for several months at the Albany Institute of History and Art. More than 90 paintings spanning his 40-year artistic career, many of them paintings about the history of Albany and the Hudson River Valley and the region. He produced, to go along with the exhibit, this incredible book, A Sense of Time. You can find that easily on Amazon or anywhere you get your books, including Bookhouse, independent booksellers. You can go to Len Tantillo's website. But it gives you the sweep of the incredible amount of historical paintings, maritime paintings that Len has done in his career. Now, I'm a word person. I write long articles and books, and Len, it's often been said, a picture's worth 1,000 words. He's written millions of words with his paintings, I'd like to say. What sets him apart, I think, is so many artists, in addition to his artistic quality, it's the quality of his research. He's somebody I've been to his studio many times over the years. I've interviewed him for historical articles, and he's highly regarded from people, historians at the State Museum and across the state, as somebody who really does the research on history before he dives into a painting. He's got a long process. So one of the things that Len has been interested in for at least 40 years is the Hudson River, particularly the Hudson River in Albany. I wrote a biography on Mayor Erastus Corning, and one of his negative legacies was that he allowed 787 to cut Albany off from the river. Acres and acres of riverfront were filled in to create that sort of cement monstrosity and tangle of spaghetti overpasses that block the river from, the beautiful vista of State Street and beyond. And Len has painted the historical view of that river and the basin that was in Albany for centuries until 787 was put in the early 1970s. I felt it's always been a terrible kind of affront to our legacy. What really made Albany was the river from really, indigenous peoples' times, and certainly during the beaver trade between the Dutch and the native peoples throughout the early stages of trade between New York City and Albany, and then as a conduit to the west through the Erie Canal. And the very first lock is situated in Albany of the Erie Canal. This rich history has recently been reconsidered and reimagined in a really interesting way by Len. Now, this is something that he's been talking about, I've been interested in, I've written about for at least 25 years. That sense of why can't we reclaim the riverfront? You know, what made Albany, what helped it flourish, really its best asset is now blocked by acres and acres of ugly concrete and traffic. And we've lost that relationship to the river that we used to have, very tangible relationship. So Ed had this idea really when Mayor Jennings was Mayor, Jerry Jennings, 25 years ago or more. And he's going to explain it in maps and visual representations. Like I said, I've been writing stories about Albany since 1981 when I came to the university for graduate school in the English department. In 1984, I joined the newspaper. I'm still writing for the newspaper. And I've seen a lot of ideas for the river come and go. This Len's idea, the way it's visualized, the way it's imagined, to me is the most exciting thing that I've seen that could happen, that could transform the city of Albany and the whole region in really dynamic ways. So we're going to have a conversation. I'm just kind of, like I said, the opening act. I'm going to turn it over to Len, and then we've got lots of time for Q&A. So Len, you ready to take it away, or is this Clem? I'm not sure. They said Clem may want to speak, Clem the pumpkin, but
yeah.
we'll
Well, you know, with I know that we've got a fair amount of time, so I was thinking like maybe you could do another, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes of accolades. Because
I can read right from the book, Len.
Yeah, because I really enjoy that. That's my favorite part of doing these programs, is to hear that. So, and I never get it at home, so you know it's kind of fun. But anyway, getting into the program, what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I'm going to be showing a presentation that I've made a number of times. Most recently a few weeks ago, and it's it'll give you an idea of how this project came about and how it's sustained some energy over all these years. So I'm going to switch to my screen, and we'll do a slide program here. So hopefully you can see this. Paul, can you see that?
Yeah, it looks great, Len.
Okay. And you know, Paul, when I get through, before I close out the slides, if there's one that you wanted to go back to or talk about, we can do that before we get back on screen. So
okay.
As you mentioned, I've been depicting scenes of Albany and the Hudson River for the last 40 years. And this is a painting of Fort Orange. It's set in the 1650s. This is a painting of Albany in the 1780s. This is one of the large paintings. This painting is almost 10 feet long. And every time I've painted it, I've been fascinated by this arc of shoreline, which doesn't exist anymore. It was part of the Albany Basin, which is depicted in this painting, and it was in the by the mid 1800s, it had been enclosed with this wharf. So the harbor area was behind this row of buildings. This is Quay Street back here. This is an assortment of maps that I've used for references for these paintings. This is a detail from a Dutch map that was drawn in the 1630s. This is a Romer's map from about the 1690s. This is a map from the 18th century. This is from later in the 18th century, and this is a 19th century map. And the one thing that they all have in common is that arc, that amazing bit of shoreline. The Hudson River was almost twice as wide as it is today. That's how much it's been filled in. And what once was a viable maritime center, probably the most active on the Hudson River north of Manhattan, disappeared. Albany, for some reason or other, practical or otherwise, gave up on hosting maritime activities. In 1995, I have been collecting over the years the various proposals that had been made for downtown Albany. And they ranged from fairly basic improvements to street architecture, all the way up to the construction of whole new cities that spanned over the highway all the way out to the river. And I kept thinking that so much effort was being put into trying to get the city back to the water that maybe it could be looked at the other way around, that maybe the river could be brought back into the city. And especially since I was thinking about that arc of shoreline. So from time to time, I would meet with friends or business meetings, and the paintings would be discussed, and I'd mention this idea of bringing the water back into Albany, and most of the time I'd be making a sketch like this one on a napkin, where I would show the river and I would show the idea of a canal coming under 787 and going down Broadway, making its way to the north end of the city, and then back out under 787 and out to the river. And at one point, I made this sketch in someone's appointment book. And the woman that I was meeting with had just kind of flipped to an empty page, and I made the drawing on it. And sometime later, she was with a woman who was married to a reporter from the Times-Union. And they were about to schedule a meeting, and when she flipped to the page, the woman said, "What's that?" And it was explained that it was an idea for a canal in Albany. So it made its way to her husband, whose name was Tim Cahill, who still writes from time to time for the Times-Union. And Tim wanted to do an article, and it got bounced around a little at the Times-Union, but it eventually made it to the paper, and it was front page news on the Times-Union, and calls started coming in. There was interest, so I was contacted by Mayor Jennings, and he asked me if he could give me some seed money, and if I could just put the idea in its raw form into a brochure or a pamphlet of some kind. So I worked with Pat Mahoney and Tiag, his urban planner at Smith & Mahoney Engineering, and also with landscape architect Bruce Heiser. Both Pat and Bruce have since passed away, unfortunately, so they never saw it go anywhere beyond this idea. But what we produced was a plan for downtown Albany, where we would use the underpass just south of the SUNY headquarters building, which is now a highway access to Broadway, use that as passage for vessels to come into the city, with a marina in front of the SUNY headquarters building, the old D&H headquarters building at the foot of State Street, and then continue a canal down Broadway, making its way in and around a number of other marinas, and then back out near Central Warehouse in that area where the highway is 60 feet above the street and then back out into the river. We never really, this idea was never developed beyond just the conceptual stage. Although some months after this was presented, Saratoga Associates did make a suggestion that was kind of borrowed from this idea for a marina at the north end of the city near Central Warehouse, but that was never acted on. So 25 years have now gone by, and in looking back over those 25 years, there are a number of examples where canals have been built in urban spaces that have been highly successful. This is the Bricktown Canal in Oklahoma City, a relatively recent canal, basically taking city drainage and expanding it to become an active canal. It has been a great success. The money that was spent there has been long since returned in revenue. It's an attraction for not just Oklahoma City, but for the entire region. Many of you probably have heard of the canal in Providence, Rhode Island. I went to school in Providence, and when I began school there, the city was filling the canal in to make it into a parking lot. So it's incredible for me to look back and see that at some point, the city realized that it was better used as a canal, and they not only uncovered it, but they enhanced it. As a kind of a footnote, this is where I went to college. This is Rhode Island School of Design right here, and it did not look like this back in the 60s. So it's been a big success for Rhode Island and for New England in general. Some of you are familiar with the river fire. This is the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, and one of the questions that has come up is what happens with a canal in the off-season? We know how you use it in the summertime. Well, the Canadians know how to use their canals year-round, and the Rideau Canal is a major attraction both summer and winter. Thousands of people using it, vendors, food vendors. This is the Rideau Canal at Christmas time. San Antonio Riverwalk, many of my friends have been there, and it's not a gigantic waterway. And that's one of the things about canals. They're intimate. They're great places for dining and gathering, and there's enough activity to make it all very, very engaging. And I think it's the scale of it. The scale of it makes it a place that you want to be close to. If you've traveled to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, or you've been on the canals in England or in Germany, you know what that feeling is like. Chicago has had canals for 2 centuries, and the city actually couldn't really function without the canals being there. The interesting thing about the Chicago canals is that because the level of the water is much lower than the street, you can see how they've kind of terraced this area to make use of the entire elevation change. Well, back to reality. We all know this. It's a horrible, ugly eyesore. It doesn't get better when you get close to it. The look of this will not change. And the incredible thing about the Central Warehouse building in Albany is that it is a substantial structure. These columns are 4 feet thick. The ceiling heights in here are pretty high. They're about 10 feet, but the inside is a mass of structure. It would cost a tremendous amount of money to tear this building down. The structure itself is kind of fascinating, and I think this is what makes it viable for redevelopment. It's been infilled. It's basically an arrangement of columns and floor slabs with an exterior infill. Because it's an exterior infill, those infill panels can be knocked out. And if they were knocked out, then you could fill them in a variety of different ways to create spaces inside that might be used for all kinds of things, whether commercial or office space or residential. And the building is so substantial that you can add floors to it. So here in this schematic design, what I've done is put 2 stories on top of the building, the upper deck being used as possibly several restaurants. This is a map that we were looking at earlier. This is Albany in the 1850s, and the basin that I was talking about here, these are those the wharfs that were built to protect the harbor area. This was a busy port. That end, the north end of the Albany Basin, is the beginning of the Erie Canal. It's where Lock 1 was located. And barges would enter through the locks into a basin, a holding basin. And within the basin, they would await their turn to go through the waylock, which was a system designed to calculate the toll that each barge would be charged to pass through the canal. And then these are the slips, one of 2 of many, many slips in the that were part of the Albany Lumber District. The central warehouse building was built later on up in this area. This is a schematic model that I built showing the renovated central warehouse building with some other commercial buildings also as part of that complex. This is the Hudson River out here. This would be access from the river where Lock 1 is now buried underground. This is the canal basin restored. And if this idea were to be implemented, this area, this part of Albany would be transformed from its current derelict condition to something like this. And if that were to happen, or something like that were to happen, there are already some facilities here that would make it even more interesting. The new pedestrian walkway that the city has been developing over the summer would pass over a small marina area. This would be the restored, possibly apartments of Central Warehouse. And then maybe this is in a neighborhood. This is near the Arbor Hill neighborhood. There could possibly be some kind of civic center here. Also, the development of commercial buildings here that could be used for restaurants, things like that. There's also enough space to construct open air pavilions that could be used by the neighborhood for family gatherings or picnics or occasions like that. The marina itself would be accessible to fairly substantial vessels because clearance under the highway is nearly 60 feet. And then there'd still be enough area here to develop that could be used for things like farmers markets or flea markets. This is the area that's now used as a parking area for the crews that race in the Hudson River. And maybe this area might also accommodate a boathouse for those crews and places to store their boats, and also be a public attraction. So that's sort of what this digital model is all about. That's what you're seeing here. You're seeing the pedestrian walkway and a possible civic center and a marina accessible from the river. That would transform this at eye level into an experience like this, where you would be able to see Albany, the city, but the perspective would be so much different. This would be, if you're traveling into the city from the north, this is what you would see instead of just an eyesore. This is the parking district, and I had originally had an idea of developing this into an inner harbor, which we've since learned that this is not something that would be possible only because development has been planned in this area. But the idea of bringing the canal in under the highway and developing this marina in front of the D&H building could be enhanced by commercial development of sites in this area. These are some views of what might happen if it was transformed. Getting back to the original idea of 25 years ago, here you see the marina in front of the SUNY headquarters building and the canal making its way through the city here. I've even kind of, the Half Moon, the future of the replica of Henry Hudson's ship is sort of uncertain. It seems that it will be coming back to the States. And if that were to happen, I was thinking that this would be a great place to have a permanent exhibition open to the public of the Half Moon. This is the painting that I made 25 years ago of the marina in front of the old D&H building. One of the ideas that came out of the original proposal was that when you take a look at the Erie Canal as it existed at the beginning of the 19th century and through the 19th century into the 20th century, here is Lock 1, the canal basin, and an overview of just how active that lumber district was with all those slips and all those individual lumber companies handling milled lumber that was being cut from the Adirondacks and then milled and brought to Albany for sale. That's Lock 1. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, we know that it's still there. Here it's very well detailed and dimensioned. You can see exactly where the canal is and how it the scale of it and details of it. Lock 1 is located right there. So here we have Central Warehouse, Modern Press, the Albany boat crews keep their boats here. And we know quite a bit about it, even though it hasn't substantially been excavated. In 2002, two professors from Union College in Schenectady, Dennis Foley and Andrew Wolf, did a very modest excavation. They were allowed to dig in this corner of the property of Modern Press. And they just excavated a very small area, but they didn't have to go very deep to find that the stones of Lock 1 are still there, and they're in incredibly good shape. There's even hardware from the gates and sluices that were used for the canal gates that are still there and in good condition. This is one of the last photographs that was taken of Lock 1 before it was buried. It seems from the evidence that we have that the entire lock is still in place under the street. This is a drawing that was made in the 1850s of Lock 1, and you can see these beautiful curvilinear granite blocks, the stairways, the overall design of it. It was a beautiful lock. If you were to undertake the excavation and restoration of Lock 1, there are a number of problems that would have to be resolved. Who owns the lock? Is it owned by the people who own the property above it? Is it owned by the state? Is it owned by the city? You'd have to secure the funds to undertake any aspect of a project like this. You'd have to dig test holes and find out where it's located and what the condition of it was. You'd have to resolve the property conflicts. For instance, modern press would have to be relocated somehow. Minor adjustment to vehicular traffic. And then the major work, you'd have to start the excavation and then restore what's there. And then you'd also have to figure out how's it going to be maintained, who's going to manage it. But if those things could be addressed, that's where Lock 1 is. You can see that you would easily have access from the Hudson River into the lock, and then from the lock into any development of a marina that might take place inland. So this is a digital model that I built of a possible park. So let's say that there's no way that you could undertake the canal project all at once, or even maybe right from the start. But this is a place where the project could begin with a park built around Lock 1 of the Erie Canal. And so that's about as far as we've taken this project so far. We have an ever-growing group of interested citizens and people who are involved, lawyers and developers who are starting to show interest and starting to have an input into this idea. I don't know where it'll go. I don't know whether the ideas that have been presented so far will take root at all. But one thing that I am absolutely convinced needs to take place for Albany to ever be connected with that river again is for the city to have some sort of major public development of a marina that accommodates vessels and makes Albany viable as a port again, not just for cargo at the Port of Albany, but for people who are using the river for recreational or transit purposes. So that's the program that I have developed so far. So Paul, if there was any comments you want to make, or any slides you want to look at again?
It's exciting and it's dynamic, and it's your ability to see and imagine and create these visualizations that really has people excited. You know, Len has been a key person of the Albany Waterway Project team. I was brought in as well. People who are really driving it are BJ Costello, an attorney who's also the chair and the driver behind the Slater, the destroyer escort. And he's really been part of downtown Albany, both with his law firm and lives in Albany for 50 years. And he is disappointed, upset, even angry, I would say, about the condition and what's available downtown. You know, I've been here since 1981, like I said, when I came to graduate school. There's been a lot of fits and starts, but not much done really to transform Albany. When you look at the sweep of the city's history, probably the greatest influence was Nelson Rockefeller in the Empire State Plaza, but also along the way, people like the great architects, Marcus T. Reynolds, and I put Len in that company of one of our great artists in our history. So I do think that there's a possibility that this can happen. We've had some really interesting meetings. We met with Brian Stratton, the commissioner of the Canal Corporation. He was very excited by this. We met with Paul Tonko, a congressman, who was especially interested in the history and the excavation, reconnecting it to Lock 1, which is really one of our most central historical points of Albany. What also strikes me is that at the time that Lock 1 was built, Albany was a top 10 city in the country. And people like Chet Opalka, a major philanthropist who's also part of the project team, his mantra is always, why do we look down on ourselves? Why do we have this small Albany syndrome? And when I see all those other cities, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, in Canada, all the ones that Len showed, I don't really see a reason why it couldn't happen in Albany. We met with Clough Harbor, a major engineering firm. They're currently doing a really massive project to repair and replace the 48-inch culverts that draw water up from the Hudson River, go all the way around the Empire State Plaza, which I've seen a couple, stories below the concourse, and it's for cooling and heating that massive government complex. But we met with them. They thought this idea was very interesting. And the direct quote is, there is nothing that money cannot solve in modern engineering. He said it's entirely possible to create the entire scope of Len's vision. It will take money. We've moved to the point where we're trying to get money for a feasibility study to hire some architects to really look at the engineering and feasibility. So far, we have not been successful, but I think this shows incredible promise to reclaim the river that was lost with the building of 787, and also to be an economic driver. In those images, you see restaurants, you see people, you see, boat operators on the canals and all those other cities, and it's civic pride in addition to economic development. So I think it's really exciting, and I guess I'm an optimist. I think it can happen. One of the things we address, there's a reason why the central warehouse is really being touted as a community for parkland and gatherings. Mayor Sheehan, who we also have met with, her real central focus, as it should be right now, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we think that addresses it with Len's, the way it would revitalize Arbor Hill and bring opportunity to a lot of people in Albany. So I think we can, unless you want to add something, Len, we can, ask for some questions. Do you want to bring anything else up there?
Just one point, Paul, and that is that the project, or this idea of a waterway in Albany, has been kept alive by the Times-Union. It hasn't been kept alive by me. I mean, I did it in 95, but it's been writers like you and Chris Churchill and Tim Cahill, whose fascination with it at the beginning, and then periodically over the years, that has kind of kept it refreshed. And I guess maybe deep down, I felt that at some point in time, we might get to a tipping point of interest where it starts to take on some energy. And it feels a little bit like that's what's going on now, because what I'm hearing are developers who are kind of excited about this. They see the potential of it. It would be, I think it's a commercial project that can have a civic impact.
Yeah, and I think it's really a positive development that Redburn developers who have, reclaimed, renovated, and brought back some other eyesores in Albany, like our old newspaper office on Sheridan, and it's now the Nick. It's a great apartment complex. Also, the former Kenmore Hotel. They've had great success in restoring these kind of decrepit, abandoned downtown spaces, and they're very interested in Central Warehouse. You'll see a major apartment complex just starting to open in phases on Broadway, just around the corner from the new Capitol Repertory Theater and Albany Distilling Company in Arbor Hill. The warehouse district is very active and doing well with Wolf's Beer Garden and Nine Pin Cider. Young people, want things to do in downtown, and there's a tremendous number of young people moving into downtown. I did the story in the Kenmore Hotel, for instance. I think it's about 600 units. They told me over 40% were from people from New York City who can now work remotely, and the average age there is probably in their 30s, they told me. So these people come from cities like you showed, with a lot of exciting things happening. With vital downtowns, with canals that always have something interesting and have that intimate kind of relationship to water that you mentioned. And I really do think, ideas kind of cycle through, and this might be the time. The infrastructure bill is eventually going to be passed, and as Congressman Tonko told us, that's a once in a lifetime or generation opportunity to get federal funds to do project like this. So I would say I'm optimistic.
Yeah, so we should take some
Yeah.
questions and, comments.
Yes.
Fascinating and exciting. I'm on board. That was great. I really enjoyed that. I never was privy to that plan or anything like that before. And I have to say, it was very well done and very exciting.
I think we're about ready, Len. That the next phase will be, some kind of public website and presentation. We've been showing it to a lot of groups privately, and Len, like I said, is central to the whole operation with his artistry and his visualizations. There's been only positive comments, and I think there is some popular momentum behind it right now.
Yeah, and I think I hope that one of the things that comes through in the presentation is that there's flexibility in how you could approach this. You don't have to do billions of dollars worth of construction to start with. You can start on a more modest level and let it expand, let it grow, let the public get used to it. As interest increases, then maybe the development continues. But I think way back when in the mid 90s, when I was speaking, when Mayor Jennings and I would meet, he would say, "This is fantastic," he said, "but how would you ever start something like this?" And I said to him, "Mayor, you could start this next week with $10,000. And he said, "How would you do that?" And I said, "Start digging up Lock 1. People will come there just to see what you're doing, just because they'd be interested in the archaeological aspect of that piece of the project. And maybe from there, you could take it to the next level and the next level and the next level." But I think that there is public interest, and it's a couple things that I hate to hear. One is, why would I be interested? I don't own a boat. Well, I don't own a boat. Not only do I not own a boat, I can't even swim. So, but one thing I do like to do is sit by the water and drink wine. And that would be my primary interest in seeing the canal built. But when we vacation and we go to places where there are waterfronts, we don't go there because we have boats. We go there because we're attracted to the activity of it and the ambiance and the atmosphere of it all. And Albany has the most important resource already. It has a river, and it has a river that's not used.
Here's a good example. Schenectady kind of beat us to it with their casino and marina. My wife and I like going there. Druthers Brewery has an outdoor patio. Shaker and Vine has an outdoor patio. They're fully sold out, those apartments and condos. There's a marina where boats, and like Len said, it's nice to sit there, have a bite to eat, have a drink, and look at the activity. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, grew up around the water, living on the water. I mean, there's something interesting about boats coming and going, the changing landscape of a waterway. And as you see, all those other cities, including Schenectady, have done it. It's not impossible. You know, engineering has come a long way since DeWitt Clinton and those crews with think what they built with pickaxes and shovels and nothing but manual labor. You know,
Yeah.
360
That's a great,
miles.
yeah, that's a great contrast. 360 some miles,
Right.
and Albany's trying to get a 1 mile built.
Okay, looks like we do have some questions or comments. Dean, do you want to start?
There's a chat from Irene Laurie, but I think she's left the
No, I think
web.
I still see her here. I think she's still listed. Let's see.
Okay.
Let me try to.
Maybe she'd like to speak.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, well, if you Google the waterway in Seoul, you will see that they removed a street or a highway and put in this charming little stream that goes through the city, and everybody goes down and sits by it, and it's just a delight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
I think we need a waterway project committee trip, Len.
Yeah.
You know that there's so much those canals. I haven't been to any of the ones in Asia, but I have been to the Netherlands, and I've been to a number of canals in England. As a matter of fact, we visited an artist in England who's has a little cottage on a very small canal. That canal probably isn't wider than 25 feet. So the barges, passenger barges, pass right next to her studio. I really envy her view. She had from her workspace is on the second floor of the studio, and she can look up and down the canal as these boats come and pass. And in the evening, we gathered together and we just walked along the towpath of the canal, and it was a terrific experience.
Right. You know, historically too, Len has painted this period and knows this period. I wrote about, like I said, Mayor Erastus Corning, but his great grandfather, the original Erastus Corning, founder of the New York Central Railroad, he also was a land speculator and owned many canals. There are many small feeder canals, you know, predated the Erie Canal and predated the railroads. It was really the highways to move goods, and to imagine that they could do it all with very, you know, crude machinery 150, 200 years ago. That this isn't an insurmountable engineering issue in Albany.
You know, I think there are so many incredible photographs that were taken in the 19th century that, to me, they break my heart. If you look up Clinton Square in Syracuse in the era of the canal, what a magnificent port Syracuse had! What a magnificent canal marina they had in Syracuse in the 1800s. It was, the architecture was beautiful around it. The way the canal sort of became much wider in the center of the city, they gave it up. They filled it in. They paved over it. It has all that charm is gone. Erie Boulevard in Schenectady, the charm of that canal that once passed through that city. I mean, it's been revived on a small scale, but what it was at one time was grand, was magnificent. The D&H Canal in places like Kerhonkson and Ellenville, just gone. We gave up on them because we became dependent on a bit on the railroad, but mostly on vehicular traffic. highways, cars and trucks.
Things
And
go in cycles, Len. Look at the price of gas now and concerns about these polluting internal combustion engines. Maybe it's time to get back to the river.
yeah, I had an interesting experience 2 summers ago on in a canal lock just below Stillwater. I'd gone up there fishing with a friend of mine. We were in his bass boat, and when we got to the lock, we had to wait because they were loading the lock with 150 kayaks. That was amazing. All these kids in kayaks kind of cramming into this lock and all the colors of all those kayaks. And then the lock kind of, the water level adjusting down to the level of the river and the gates opening and all 150 kayaks making their way out into the river. It was spectacular.
Wow.
And yet we were the only ones who witnessed it. We were the only ones there. Something like that happening on Broadway in Albany, I think would draw some attention.
Yep. Actually, it looks like we've got quite a few people with questions. So
Yeah.
why don't we- Paul, why don't you-
Yeah, Paul's unmuted.
Hi, guys. Hey, Len, I find this kind of interesting and enlightening, but I'm also a little perplexed because now you got me thinking about too many possibilities. So should I be angry or happy? I'm not sure. But yeah, I think there are a lot of possibilities. My angle in all this is more on the social entrepreneurship side. And so for Paul Grondahl, I think you're right. I think there's a lot we can do economically as well to bring some of the neighborhood to the economic development of all this. And it wouldn't cost much. I can't imagine it being that expensive. So, hey, Len, I guess on balance, I need to thank you. And I'm all in.
It is a frustrating thing, I think, to be aware of the resource and not see it utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been to some of the places you've mentioned, so I can see what the potential is. And it's frustrating that the Hudson River is known all over the world, but yet if you're in Albany, it's still Smallbany. And I was aware that Lock 1 was buried. I'm perplexed. I don't get it. So anything we could do to revitalize that, I think would be great for the area.
Good. George, do you have a question? I wasn't sure. George Hastings?
I see Ray Bromley had a comment. Ray, I can allow you to talk if you want to make it in person.
Hi,
Yes, we can hear you.
okay.
Go ahead, Ray.
It seems to me that starting at the north end is very, very much easier than starting at the south end. And what we have to face is the possibility that a project like this, it might take 50 years to actually become a loop going down to the south end, or it might never happen. You might just end up with the north end portion, period. But starting with Lock 1 and the creation of a marina and potentially resolving the horrific eyesore of the central warehouse is extremely attractive. What catches my attention, though, is that you have 2 valleys in North Albany which require storm drainage. And storm drainage is becoming a much, much more serious problem. You know, we just had catastrophes in New York City over Hurricane Ida that no one imagined that you could suddenly get, you know, the thruway blocked completely, cars swamped and so on. Same with the Mosholu Parkway in the entrance. So storm drainage is very crucial, increasingly so because of climate change. Is there any way that a storm drainage plan for these 2 valley axes coming towards the Hudson could be also turned into a flush out the basin plan to keep the water clean and fresh?
Yeah, Fox Creek is still there. Fox Creek, you see Fox Creek on the Dutch maps, you see Fox Creek on the English maps, and It doesn't go underground until the late 19th century, but it still discharges into the Hudson River. So yes, those waterways can be used. Just the circulation of that water will keep the canal flushed out. Another more mechanical feature of the area is that Paul mentioned it earlier. The pumping station on the Hudson River produces moves hundreds of thousands of gallons of water a day uphill in and around the Empire State Plaza, and then discharges that water back down into the Hudson River. It's such a massive amount of water that we were told by engineers that it has actually raised the temperature of the Hudson River by 1 degree, just that one feature. So I was thinking that maybe there's some way to use a marina facility of some kind as a heat sink for the water before it's discharged into the Hudson. But again, this is why we need a feasibility study. This is why we need some serious engineering input to figure out, is any of this possible? If so, what are the obstacles that have to be overcome, and do we get back? What do we gain? What could be gained by a project of this scale? So good question, and I think also a good point that you made, Ray, about keeping the water in the canal kind of constantly changing and refreshing.
Dean, it looks like there are a couple of people who raised their hands.
Hey, Chris, I can, you can speak.
Hi, okay, yeah.
Hi, Chris.
You can hear me? Okay, thanks. Really great talk. You've combined engineering and history and art. It's a left and right brain stuff. It's great. And your proposed Lock 1 showed a higher water level at the west end, and it looked like it was kind of a dead end, but
it might not even be water.
well, no, I guess what I'm wondering is you'd have to somehow get natural water level higher. I'm just curious from a historical perspective, that how far upstream did that higher end of the canal ultimately connect with some naturally flowing water? How far did that?
It was the water that made its way to Albany was being directed from Waterford. So
it went all the way up to Waterford. Wow, yeah.
So the height of the height of the water in the lumber district was about 10 feet higher than where it discharged into the Hudson River. That's what the lock was for. That's what Lock 1 was for. In that lock suggested image that I made of the restored Lock 1, I'm showing the water levels here because historically that's the way that lock worked. It might not be watered. It might be planted and with ground cover or something just to simulate the two elevations initially anyway. But what I was thinking is that eventually if and when a marina were built in front of Central Warehouse, that lock wouldn't function as a lock anymore. It would just, the gates would be open and the water elevation inside the marina and the elevation of the water in the Hudson River would be the same. So with the point that Ray was making earlier about flooding from discharge, it's important, I think, to note that the water level in the canal would be the same level as the water level in the river. So if we ever had a flood that elevated the height of the river to a point where it came into the city, it would be a total catastrophe anyway, because the Hudson River would be doing it.
Yeah. So I guess, and I'm curious about how was that Lock 1, was the traffic, did boats come from the north down the canal? or they came down the Hudson and then through Lock One. That
Well,
was
the only reason for that diversion through Lock One was the lumber district. And that was a primary industry at that time. So you saw how many slips there were.
well, no. So I guess did boats come in and out of the lumber districts through the canal? So I
Yeah.
mean through Lock One, or did they actually come in from Waterford?
Well, let's say that you were moving, that you weren't in the lumber business. You were moving coal, and you were sending a barge with coal in it to Utica, and it was coming up from Kingston. That barge would get towed all the way up to the Waterford locks and would enter the canal up there. It wouldn't come in at Albany. The traffic at Albany would be mostly lumber. A passenger packet by that time would be, by the late 19th century, they would be pretty rare anyway. But if they were in transit, they would be bypassing the Albany system entirely. They would go right to Waterford to get into the canal. That was how it worked.
Great, thanks.
Carol?
Hi, Len. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. I first want to add my praise to what you had said, Paul, about the exhibit of Len's work at the Albany Institute this summer. It was absolutely fantastic. And I hope that it returns soon so that those people who missed it can see it. I know you do have exhibits here and there once in a while, so promote them, Len. They're wonderful. I lived in Albany for about 30 years more recently. First came in the 60s to go to school here, moved away, and then came back for 30 years. And I remember the first year that I moved to Albany, I lived in the Tenbreck area. And that was where the lumber barons had their fancy houses.
Yeah.
But I put my bicycle on the back of my car to go down to the Corning Preserve to ride my bike. And although I could see the river from my house at that time, I couldn't figure out how to get there. It was pretty disturbing that there was no direct way to get there from where I lived so close. I finally figured it out, but it always annoyed me. And I saw lots of things come and go. Remember the duck? The duck that used to take people on tours?
Yeah.
That failed.
Mm.
There was a barge restaurant on the Hudson River
Yeah.
that closed.
Mm.
I loved that place. We
Yeah.
loved going there.
Yeah.
There was one in Troy, same thing, that failed. Where is the vision in Albany? I'm really distressed. More recently, I moved to Schenectady, and just like Paul, I love going down to the Mohawk Harbor. There's always activity there. Zumba classes going on while you're having a beer at Druthers, those kinds of things. Where's the vision in Albany? I love the fact that you say that there are some people who seem interested, Chet and others. How can we help you move this forward?
Talk to your friends. Tell them about it. Get them interested. Just spread the word. And I think that's the best way. I mean, we have the obstacle that has to be overcome is Albany now has a crisis in a social crisis going on, like a lot of other cities. But I'm not sure that social problems like the one that's going on now they're not very easy to fix. You can't fix them with money. They have to do with fear and anger and ignorance and a hopeless future, and that generates frustration, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, obviously it leads to violence. And I think that what has to happen in Albany is something that's transformative in a very big way, that offers opportunities for entrepreneurs, but it also offers opportunities for all the way down the line for people who are seeking employment or people who are just looking for something to do or some place to take their family or some place to be with their family. And so even though this idea of a waterway it's not a social project, it has social implications. And yeah, I'm frustrated because I see that I can see the potential, but I don't see enthusiasm and vision where it needs to be to move this one step closer. And that's what we're trying to generate. And that's what you can do by just talking to your friends and telling them that you saw this. And if the opportunity comes along, I did my first public presentation of this idea 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago at the Huxley Theater at the New York State Museum. And we had over 100 people there. But because of COVID and fear of the pandemic, they had limited the occupancy. That place can hold 200 people or 250 people. And I could see doing more public presentations, maybe even making some sort of a video that we could get, we could stream on YouTube or something like that. So it's getting the word out now.
Will do.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, I do agree with what you said, Paul, and I think it was from Congressman Tonko that with the infrastructure bill hopefully about to pass, it seems like it would be a golden opportunity to use some of that funds for projects like this. But I think like Len and Carol were saying, you also need the political, will and leadership to make the money and the vision and leadership to make it happen. Do you think that the mayor's office or the county executive's office, once that infrastructure bill is passed, would ask for community input on how that money should be spent, for the betterment of the city and the county? And might that be an opportunity for, voices like yours to be heard and taken more seriously?
Yeah, I think we have been doing a lot of outreach behind the scenes. Timing is everything. And, we've just gradually been doing some public presentations like Len mentioned. We met with Mayor Sheehan. We've met with Kevin O'Connor, the representative of the county, Dan McCoy's economic development person. We met with some people on the second floor of the executive chamber, but we're in this terrible political disruption. The person who could have spearheaded it, who built the Tappan Zee, named it after his father, Andrew Cuomo is gone. He would have been somebody. You need someone at that level, the governor's level could get behind this, as Nelson Rockefeller did. Some still argue, but, transform the city, 98 acres of the Empire State Plaza. So Kathy Hochul is going to be in a major primary battle. I think she could be a champion for this. She comes from Erie County. She understands and respects and has done many trips on the canal. And but it's going to take, I think, someone at that level to leverage both state and federal and private development. Private developers who we've talked to have shown interest in this. They see the potential. Things go in cycles, and I think Albany is now on a rebound kind of cycle. When you see all those apartments being built downtown, there's a reason. Developers are in it to rent apartments and make money, And I think they're doing that, but people who come to live there are going to want something interesting. Right now, they're going to Troy, which has a great downtown. There's a lot more going on right now in downtown Troy or in Schenectady than there is in Albany, unfortunately. So I think politically there's interest, but it's got to stabilize and see who the next, governor is going to be.
Yeah, interesting. Because the other proposals I've read in the Times Union from people like, Chris Churchill was just take down 787, demolish it or put it underground. But your proposal seems to be a little bit more reasonable in that you leave 787 there, you just kind of build around it. It seems to me that might be a more sensible approach than trying to remove, interstate 787 or bury under it, like in Boston. What was it? The Big Dig?
The Big Dig, and they're doing it now in Seattle, where I'm from.
That seems
They
to me
had
to
a
be
big
even a more,
overpass.
an even more disruptive approach
Yeah.
than what you're proposing.
I mean, there is a group that's been meeting and we, are friendly with them and get along, who want to basically, like, similar to the reports that Len showed early on, build out over 787, essentially kind of a roof that goes over 787, or tear it up completely. But again, that doesn't really transform it the way, the way Len envisioned the northern part with the restored block 1, or the southern part. Imagine that space in front of the SUNY central building as a canal with, somewhat like you can see in Schenectady at the harbor and casino development. I mean, imagine that in the center of downtown. It would be a great attraction. Part of this was BJ Costello would bring people to Albany. He just biked the whole canal with a group, and they came to Albany on a Saturday morning, I think, and they were all hungry and things. There was nothing in downtown Albany for this group to have breakfast and to gather. He did the whole stretch of the state, and every little town had things inviting and places where they could go for lunch, breakfast, dinner. There was nothing in downtown Albany. That kind of says it all.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. I don't see any more questions. Do you, Dean?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Paul Lynn for a great presentation. Very engaging, as you could see by all the Q&A and the interactive discussions. Our next webinar, I think, is in 2 weeks, November 15th. Is that correct, Dean?
Yes.
And can you tell people what it's about?
Sure. This will be our panel for the semester, pardon me, and the title of which is The Challenges of Providing Services to the Intellectual and Developmental Disability Community Within Today's Political Environment. So it's a good time to have that. The moderator will be one of our board members, Donna Canestraro. And there'll be several representatives from agencies that work in this arena, as well as Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara. So that's November 15th, and that should be excellent.
Good. Okay, well, I think that's it for today then. And again, I really want to thank Paul and Len. Any final comments, Dean?
No, as I said, this was fascinating. I mean, I live in the country, so I don't know what's going on in Albany, but I had never heard of this project, and I found it so interesting to hear about it. And as I said, I wish I had enough money in retirement that I could, foot some of the bill on this. But I'm certainly on board. I think it's something that we need and is doable. So. Fingers crossed.
Yep.
I appreciate what you both said.
Really quickly, we had a question in the Q&A. Somebody was
Yes.
disappointed they didn't see Len's exhibit. This book, A Sense of Time, you can go online, Len's website, Amazon. You can, in a way, recreate the exhibit. The 90 plus paintings are described, and there's interesting little essays by other Albany historians, and it touches on somewhat that Albany River Basin that no longer exists, that this project would bring back.
Oh, and also, if any of the attendees aren't on our mailing list, just send me or Dean an email and we'll certainly add you to the list so that you're, fully informed about our upcoming webinars. So I think unless Dean or Len or Paul have anything else to add, we'll close. It's starting to approach 3 o'clock anyway. So in that case, all right. Well, thank you again, Paul and Len, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks on November 15th. Okay.
Thanks much.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
having me.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.